Welcome again, everybody. This is your co-host, Jonathan, executive at MyPad, the most influential people of African descent.
This is Aziza, one of your co-hosts for today and founder of Own Your Narrative 54, global consultant and class of 2023 MyPad honoree.
And you're listening to the Voices of Influential People podcast, or as we like to call it, the VIP, a show powered by MyPad that connects you to the most influential people of African descent worldwide. Now, today's episode is titled Leadership and Finance for a Sustainable Future. And we're honored to have as our special guest, the first Black and youngest ever in its 120-year existence, global president of the ACCA, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, and now CEO of Rubicola, Joseph Owolabi. Welcome to the show, Joseph. Thank you for being with us today.
Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Aziza. It's a pleasure to be here. Finally, I can say yes, I'm a VIP. So thank you for that honor to be part of this very elite group of people, voices of influential people on the continent of Africa, but more importantly, make an impact all around the world. So thank you for having me.
Exactly. Thank you, Joseph. Your voice is very influential. And as you mentioned, it's, voices of Africa, but in the diaspora, so around the world. I'm joining in from London today.
And I'm joining in from the U.S.
And so whereabouts are you right now, Joseph?
Down under in Australia, Melbourne.
Wow.
And wow. Thank you for joining us all the way from there. And so as we've already caught up, we had a chance to get to meet you in person in October last year, Joseph, and it was a pleasure. And I want the audience to be able to experience a bit of that now by getting to know your personality more. So I want to ask the question, what is your favorite film and why?
Thank you again to both of you. What a terrific host you are on this podcast. In terms of what my favorite film will be, it's the couple of movies that come to mind, but anything that's got a bit of history, Greek mythology, and things like 300. I just saw Queen Captura this evening, and so movies like that tells a bit about history, helps me understand, especially for Black history, where we've come from, how we got here, would interest me. So 300, if you need one, it will be 300, and it talks about courage and people standing up for what they believe in the face of overwhelming forces.
Thank you for that, Joseph. And so when it comes to your life, and your recent work has been categorized by sustainability, leadership, and by youth inspiration. However, I know that this career path wasn't always your initial plan. So what was the initial plan, and how did this turn into you becoming the global president of the ACCA?
It's very funny that you asked me that, how I got here in my journey. When I started out, much earlier, when I was a young kid, like every other person with a dream or ambition, whatever you call it, I wanted to be a doctor because I grew up in Lagos, which is, the most populous Black city in the world. And at that time, it was the mortality rate, with women trying to have kids and all of the death rates and all of that. And I felt I could fix that. So it attracted me to medicine. And so I did pre-med, as you call it in the US, and all of that. But I got distracted at some point, when I finished best graduating out of my class, and someone said, you could go on to solve the most complex problems of the world. And that made me move into consulting, but I've loved it all along the way because I've moved from different roles. So I started first with cyber, about 20 years ago, I knew cyber would be the thing, and cyber is still the thing. So my first deep dive into consulting was in cyber penetration testing, IT controls, and what have you. Then I moved on from that into accounting because at that time I thought in future people would ask me, oh, you work for a big accounting firm. Are you an accountant? And then I'll have to explain, oh, no, it's an accounting firm, but they've got all the businesses. I thought that was too much, an explanation. Why not just do it? And that's how I got into accounting. So from studying sciences, doing a bit of pre-med, neuroscience, cardiovascular, all of that stuff. And then finding myself in finance along the way. And that's why, for me, the key lesson there for young people is to just take it a step at a time. Sometimes the career is a long one. It's a long journey. And I found in my own case that I've had to transition from different roles to what I do now.
Well, thank you for that. Because a lot of young people are concerned about a career change. So when they get out of university, they may find that what they thought they wanted, they don't want anymore. And you're someone who's managed to successfully navigate a career change and become the global head of the ACCA. And delving into that a bit more, what is the significance of that organization globally? Because I know, although it has 216,000 members, many people might not know what it is. So what is the significance of the ACCA?
Thank you, Jonathan. So in terms of how impactful or what role ACCA plays in terms of global impact, ACCA is the largest truly global accounting body. So what that means is we've got footprints in over 100 countries. In fact, we have members and students in over 180 countries. You said 216, but it's actually 245. We're going to be celebrating 250, a quarter of 1 million members very soon, in a few months. When it comes to students, what we call future members, we have over 545,000 of them. So when you think about it, we have close to about 800,000 thereabout of members and future members around the world. And these people are making impact and driving change in finance, not just in finance. Many of them are in sales, and some of them are CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and all of that. But more importantly, ACCA focused on the public good. So ACCA believes in strengthening, institutions, financial institutions. You know what happened in the US with the global financial crisis. We want to ensure that there's ethics. The ethical framework is important, that people that go into finance, the same way the doctors talk about their oath, right? In finance, it's about ethics to ensure that we have the right thinking and people are subscribed to values of integrity, of inclusion, and things like that. So that gives you an idea of what ACCA is all about.
And you've had you're young and you're evolving as a leader, and you've had the experience of leading this global organization, the ACCA, and being CEO of a company that you've founded. What are 3 key qualities that have helped you being both a founder and a leader?
Oh, thanks. I think when it comes to that, it's just sometimes doing a bit at a time, looking for things that resonate with you. I think when I started as a young person, I love to sing, I love to serve. So I started singing very early on, in a church, faith-based organization, about 4 or 5. And so most of my friends, we talk about football, sports, and games. I never did any of that because I had to attend very rigorous, choir rehearsals multiple times a week from a very young age. So all I knew was just all of that. But it taught me early on about service. So from a young age, I just knew that, I just wanted to serve and that helped me later on. So even when I was going on with my career and most of the people, my contemporaries, my peers, were focused on the next job. How do I get a 10,000 USD raise of my side? I was thinking about what can I do? How can I make the world better? How can I serve people? So when I was writing my accounting exams, I noticed people were struggling. And before I finished my exams, the thought with me was not getting a job. It was, how can I help people pass these exams? And so I started teaching before I finished my exams. And when I finished, I continued teaching. And while I was teaching, I was like, how can I represent this body? And so when you focus on back to your question, when you focus on what resonates with you, whatever it is, right? For some people, it's caring for the elderly. For some people, it's giving those that do not have a voice in society that voice. Whatever it is, when you stay long at it, and you do it long enough, then there's always, you become that one person. So for ACCA, I've been working with ACCA now, probably last 15 years, right? It started as a student, started teaching about 5 years. I've been on the board close to 10 years. So it's about a 15-year journey for me, right? Most people think, oh, you just showed up from nowhere. And I tell them, you need to start somewhere. And it takes time to build anything of repute. It takes time.
Absolutely. And I know you just said something so important, regarding you have to start out from somewhere. And we know that as you close out your term as the youngest ever global president of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, or the ACCA, as we've been referencing, we can't help but acknowledge the role proper mentorship has actually played in your journey. And so, how are you now paying it forward through mentorship to empower the next generation?
Thank you, Ziza. I think mentoring and mentorship, very, very critical. I wouldn't have got this far without people taking interest in my journey, being very generous with their time and seeing something in me and devoting their own resource, their time, whatever, to help me get here. So I know fully what mentoring can do to help enhance, to help expand the thinking and capability of people. So from a very young age, from while I was in school, when I was in uni, I always just craved any opportunity to get wisdom from my lecturers. I still keep in touch with my professors, 25 years down the line. I still call them, I still send them books. Every place I've worked, I'm in touch, and I've worked in many places. Before I started out my business, about 5 or 6 companies. Most places I've worked, I'm still in touch with my immediate boss and other, whether it's partners or the bank, in fact, my general manager is now the managing director of the bank I started out with. And so it's important for young people, but everybody actually, to think about how to identify mentors to help them progress on their journey. And we now know that there's also reverse mentoring. So as we go older, there's also things we can, when it comes to tech and all of that, the alpha generation, the Gen Zs are probably more inclined, and they can even mentor us on that. So, and that's the whole idea of reverse mentoring. So wherever we are on our journey, there is an opportunity for mentoring. And definitely I can tell you, I wouldn't have gotten this far without people that took the chance on me. But there's a way not to do it. You also find that people just go on LinkedIn and, send you messages that, oh, it'll be my mentor, I'll be my mentor. That's nice. But you want to do some groundwork. Mentors are very busy. They've got demands on their time. They're probably CEOs and they're busy and they're stressed with whatever they're doing. They've got family most times, or they have things they're passionate about. So more often than not, it helps when you do your groundwork. You make some advances. You have some results to show. Then you attract the right mentors. So when I became ACCA president, some of the people I've only heard about reached out to me directly and said, if you need anything, I'm here to help you. So that speaks volumes. It means that some mentors won't even come to you until you've achieved, and they feel that you are in that category, you are in that strata that they can work with. But I agree with you, Aziza, that mentoring is profound, it's effective, and the effects can be just mind-blowing.
Absolutely. And you've definitely shown us how mind-blowing it can be with all of the things that you've accomplished and the lives that you have touched. And speaking of that, you've lived globally, worked globally, led globally, and you're living as a Black person in Australia. And we would love to understand, what is it like being a Black person in Australia? What does that mean to you, to exist at the capacity and the level that you do as that person?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. What it means to me in Australia has got its own history, right? And I'm sure you probably know a bit about that. The original people of this land, the Aboriginal people, have been here on Earth, different reports, but over 60,000 years. And so there's a history around how the British came here, the first settlers, and all of that. Violence and genocide and what have you. So there's all of that human rights consideration to Australia. And so when we celebrate what we call Australia Day, which we just had on the 26th of January, it means different things to different people. The government and other people think we should celebrate it. That's when the first settlers came in here. But, descendants of the indigenous people beg to disagree. and they feel that that day is just a day of mourning, right? It's a day of disaster, of deaths, of, and so coming into this country with all of that, there's a lot for me to still learn. It's been 8 years since I migrated here, but I wouldn't tell you I understand all of that fully. But it also just gives me an opportunity, and I know there's some development there to really just how much of that can I take back to Nigeria, where I am from. So Nigeria, it's a different, basket in itself. We've got close to 220 million people, over 250 ethnic groups, different languages, very, very divided at its core, powerful nation. But, there's a lot of division and all of that. And so we've got some history of, civil war, in the East and all of that distrust. So I think it helps me to really understand how much of this can help with some of where I'm coming from. But in terms of being a Black person here, it's the same everywhere. Some of the challenges, you're facing in the US with all of that history, of racism, of slave trade, and what African in diaspora face around Europe and every part of the world. It's similar here. Some people believe racism is even bigger here, but it depends on how you look at it. But I think what has helped a lot is platforms such as MyPad, right, where we've got that connection. Young people doing amazing work around the globe. We can share experiences. We can uplift each other. We can beam the lights on amazing stories of how Black people, people of African descent, have done amazing things, and they continue to be great leaders around the world. So that's what I think, I'll summarize it as in terms of my impact here.
Definitely. And Australia, has very rich history, as you mentioned. I remember visiting there and just being, really amazed by all the things, that have happened regarding human rights in Australia and the Aborigine community and groups of people there. And you touched on MyPad, which is about community as well. So one quick follow-up question to all of that is, what does community mean for you? Being this person that has traversed all of these different locations, globally, communities and cultures, what does community mean for you? How do you find it?
Thank you, Ziza. Community is a big word. I think at the heart, at the core of community will be purpose. For you to have a community, a group of people come together, there must be a shared vision. So I think it's critical and a community could be a simple unit as a family. It's a small community, but whatever the nucleus is of any community, I think it's critical to have shared values, a common goal, what pulls everybody together. That's important. It should consist of different people. I think diversity is critical to community. So sometimes you all like to gather together, in churches. I'm a Christian, faith-based organization, mosque and all of that. And even though, those faith organizations talks about preaches tolerance and diversity. So it's important. Purpose is important, but how do you get there? What's the plan? How do we get from here to there? Again, I come to my part, right? There's a vision to really showcase Africa's best. So every year, 100 amazing people in healthcare, in civil society, in business, and all of those things, bringing all of them together. There's a common goal, a vision. It's diversity. It's men, it's women, it's different genders. However, come as you identify, right? There's no restrictions on, you can't be this if you're not this. And I think that's the beauty of our community at my part. And I also think there is, an action plan. It's a decade of, our people of African descent. And so from, 1994 to 2005, so 2005, right, to 2015 to 2025, we've been focused on just shining the light. So I think just those three core ingredients are important, having shared values, diversity, and having a goal or an action plan. And I think all of that, we can find in our community, and I'm proud of my part and what it represents.
Thank you, Joseph. And I what you do, it's clear from that you have a goal to make a better future. You've become the CEO of Rubicola, which is a green finance advisory firm. and you've traveled the world and experienced different cultures. So what does the future look like for you?
Oh, who knows? Who knows what the future will look like, right? And that's the puzzle, right? We don't know that. We just do our best, right? For me, I've been thinking about sustainability, the future of the planet, for at the minimum 15 years ago, when I was still about an assistant manager in an accounting firm, and I'd started investing and all of that. I only got the opportunity to step into Rubicola when here in Australia at the summer of 2019 summer, we had the worst bushfires we've had in over 100 years. Some people call it the black swan, right? And in that crisis, that disaster, we lost over 37 individuals, young people, fireys, trying to save other people stranded in their homes. Over 2 billion animals, were lost or killed. And it led to extinction of some species. The land mass that we lost alone in one of the states, New South Wales, not the whole of Australia. So New South Wales, a number of states were impacted, but just one state, it was up to the size of Belgium and France was burnt. And going through that crisis, being here on ground in Melbourne, the atmosphere, the quality of the air reduced drastically. It just reminded me of my experience back in Nigeria and South Nigeria, the Ogoni crisis, the shale and oil spillage, and some of what you have in the US too, Aziza, with the BP spill and all of those things that happened in the Gulf, right?
Yes.
And I knew that was the time to act. And so Rubicola is the first firm in Africa to be accredited by CBI. CBI is Climate Bond Initiative. It's a London-based investor body that has an ambition to raise $100 trillion to solve climate issues. So, when you think about, we want to transition to green. So the US, President Biden set an ambitious goal, 2030, 50% of the motor vehicles have to be EV, right? How do you do that? You need funds to actualize that. So there's still a huge gap in terms of the financing that will be required to birth the green economy, the green future we want to see. Solars on everybody's roof, most people driving EVs, the architecture, the buildings, all of that. And so that's what I'm focused on, trying to solve that what looks like a tiny problem, but would have big impact globally.
And one of the things you do with Rubicola is give advice to firms on what to do. And as you said, we've witnessed the climate change crisis grow internationally, not just in Australia with the bushfires, but in New Zealand, South Africa, and America, like you said. So in your experience and with your expertise, what is practical for global businesses to do to address climate change for the sake of future generations?
Thank you, Jonathan. I think we can all do something. Sometimes we get saddled with the frustration that we can't make big bang changes. However, we can do something. So from changing habits, you want to brush either in the morning or at night, or as many times you brush your teeth. Most times you have the habit of just running the tap, right? Some people just run the tap. It's as simple as knowing that you don't need to waste all of that water. In Australia here, most people are changing their attitude towards fashion. And it's as simple as not just buying clothes because you're depressed or you want to go window shopping and you just buy all the clothes and you don't use them. Because all of that's going to either end on the landfill, all of the supply chain, the cotton and all of the agriculture and the people that has to go into developing or producing a garment is enormous. Some people are into the idea of how do you also treat your clothes? How often should you wash? And so there are different thinking coming into that. And, some young people have also changed from, some of them are, vegetarian, vegans and all of that because they know how much impact consuming beef and animals have on that supply chain. So I think it's identifying areas where we can, each of us as individuals first, can make an impact. Then for corporates, there's a global call for organizations, and we know a lot of that from, President Obama at the Paris Agreement, encouraging 193 or so governments around the world. They all signed that, the Climate Accord. it was called. I think it was in 95 or so. There's been other variants of that. Every year there's a COP something. There was one here in UAE this year where the governments come together to try and encourage private sector to make an impact. In accounting, we're also pushing for it. And so this year, thankfully, there is now a new global standards for sustainability. So every company around the world, in the UK where you're based, Jonathan, in the US, hopefully, these are everywhere. Companies will now have to report the same way they have their financial statements. They also have to report because the IFRS Foundation now has a new standards for sustainability. Early days, the standards were released last year. They're effective this year, but it's a huge step. Most people never thought that would happen. So that, let's see, fingers crossed, hopefully that's successful and we see the corporates come on board.
Hopefully. And one thing you've mentioned before that I think is important for people to know is that investing 2% of the global GDP is needed to address climate change by 2050. So going forward, is there any initiatives or collaborations or government initiatives that you want to see to do this?
Oh, definitely. What we've seen is the advancement of policy. So there's a lot of policy proclamation. I just told you what President Biden has said. And, if you go, each of those governments, China has made commitments to 2060. Some other governments have made commitments to 2030. Europe had their commitments before the challenges in, a war in Russia, Ukraine, and now with the Gaza Strip. So the challenge in the world is that while you're trying to solve climate, when people issues happen and there are conflicts and there are wars, imagine trying to save the planet, but you're sending missiles somewhere and blowing up people and land. So there are trade-offs we need to think about. However, what I would like to see is closing the gap between policy and implementation. So what we've seen is a lot of policy, which is good. But if you're going to have 50% of the cars on US roads to be EV by 2030, Tesla can't even get cars they can't meet their orders. So how do you deal with the supply chain issue? So yes, the policy is there, but how do you make that happen? And that's an opportunity for young people. Whatever we're doing, if you're in fashion, how do you need to start thinking about, sustainable fashion? If you're in tech, the thinking should be, yes, AI, but I think it's an enormous opportunity that we can tap into.
Absolutely. And you have said so many key things and so many points of wisdom in what you've shared with us. And that really resonates with me, the relationship between policy and implementation, because we have so many policies on the books, but they could be standing there for years and decades and nobody has implemented, any of them, which can really benefit a lot of people within the community, locally and globally. So very, very good points. And I can't believe it, Jonathan. Can you believe that we've come towards the end of this amazing episode?
Wow.
And we always like to make sure before we leave and close out that we ask you, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to share or you feel is important, for our audience to actually know?
I think sometimes people look at, folks like yourself, Jonathan, Caesar, or myself, and sometimes they're like, oh, well, that's you, Caesar. You're in the US. It's easy in the US. Oh, Jonathan is in the UK. Everything works in the UK. Oh, Joseph is in Australia, but I'm in Pakistan. I'm in Nigeria. I can't do anything. And so they lose hope. I think one thing I would want to leave our viewers and people on this podcast with is when we talk about these VIPs, voices of influential people, they are people just like yourself. They've overcome adversity. Jonathan and Caesar, myself, and many countless of us that have been on that decade of recognition with MyPad are ordinary people that have, stayed with it. So I tell people, stay in the game. Sometimes all you need to do is just stay in the game. And we all get discouraged. I'm sure if you ask our co-hosts here, they tell you how sometimes, even today, sometimes in the day, I get discouraged multiple times, same day. So it's part of the journey. You get discouraged. Some of you are going through difficult times with family. You've lost a loved one, so you just got laid off from work. A number of the big four firms are laid off people, tech firms, all of that. There's a lot going on. But I think my message that I want to leave you with is don't be discouraged. You can be the Aziza in your community, wherever you are. You can be the Jonathan, you can be the Joseph, I did what I did in accounting. You could go do what you're going to do in tech. You could do it in agriculture. You could do it saving kids in vulnerable and abusive society. So that's what I'll leave you with. Don't be discouraged. The best is yet to come. Enjoy the journey. Stay in the game.
Yeah, stay in the game. We are fired up and ready to go, as our wonderful former President Obama used to say. So you have gotten us fired up and ready to go. And you've also mentioned an important message, for our audience to take with them too. And we always like to remember our audience throughout the interview and engage with some of the questions. So if you're ready and willing and open, we do have a question from the audience that we would love to get your answer to.
Sure, let's go.
All right. So what are 3 qualities you would advise others to develop to ascend to leadership roles like yourself?
For me, it's being authentic. I think I cannot overemphasize that. So be yourself. And if you look at it, there are so many, whatever you look at, there's a wide range of people doing the same thing and doing it very well. Depending on who you speak to, some people would tell you President Trump was their favorite. And I'm not going to talk about who's the favorite, who did what or not. But if Trump could be seen as successful in the role, but you ask someone like Obama, some people will also tell you he was successful, but they're so totally different. And so whoever you are, there is a place for you. There's a seat for you at the table. Be authentic. Be yourself. I think as people start on in their careers, if you're a musician, you start singing. If you want to start singing, you look for who's the big act, Burna Boy. You start singing as Burna Boy. But as you go on with your career, you now have to find your voice. Otherwise, you're not unique. I think it's important that we all be authentic. Look at our hosts today. Amiable, fantastic young people doing amazing things, but they're unique. And so the value we bring to society is not letting go of our authenticity. Yes, we can learn attributes and skills from other people, but not lose your identity. I don't know if I can get to 3, but authenticity definitely key on my mind. I love empathy, especially if you're a leader. You need to show empathy with your people. And I know there are different styles to leadership. Some people are transformational leaders. Some people are transactional, depending on what leadership theory you're looking at. But I think at the core of it, even if you're not an emotional person or you're a pragmatic person, it's always helped to take interest in the people you lead. Want to learn 1 or 2 things about them and show empathy. And again, remember that life is short, like literally, it is short. Sometimes people get to live to 99. Charles Morgan, Warren Buffett's associate, just died. The vice president of Berkshire just died at 99, right? Buffett's probably 93. Most people don't get to that age, right? Some people get to 70. Some people die before 40. So life is short. Make the best of it. Authenticity, we said empathy, and the last one will be understanding that there is a finite time here for us to do whatever we want to do.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful words of wisdom, and something that we can all take with us and really help us, understand our place and our space in this world and encourage us. So thank you for that. And we want the audience to, take that. And of course, as I always say, let that soak in. And don't forget to submit your questions via our platforms on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram, because you just never know. Your question might be the one that we select to be read with our next VIP.
Exactly. And Joseph, we want to thank you for blessing us with your conversation. And we want to congratulate you as you're now an official inductee into the MyPad VIP suite.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like a VIP, the VIP.
Exactly. Thank you. And to our listeners, this has been Jonathan and Aziza. Make sure you subscribe and follow us and tune into our next episode of the Voices of Influential People to hear from our next VIP.